What happens when a single father accidentally says, "I love you," to his best friend, and she doesn't laugh? 11 years. Every crisis, every 2 a.m. phone call, every birthday, every breakdown. Logan Hayes had been there for all of it, quietly, faithfully, invisibly in love with a woman he told himself he could never have. Victoria Sterling built an empire. He raised a daughter alone. And somehow, in the middle of someone else's engagement party, one careless joke cracked 11 years of silence wide open. If you've ever loved someone too long in silence, this one's for you. Like this video and drop a comment with the city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The engagement party had been going for 3 hours before Logan Hayes made the mistake that changed everything. It wasn't a dramatic mistake. No broken glass, no shouting, no scene. It was 4 words spoken casually, almost as a reflex, the way you say pass the salt or watch your step. 4 words that everybody in earshot laughed at. Everybody except Victoria. But we'll get there. The party was held at a rooftop venue on the east side of the city, the kind of place that cost more per hour than Logan made in a week. String lights had been threaded between iron posts above the crowd. Servers in white shirts moved through clusters of guests, carrying trays of small food that looked expensive and tasted like it was trying too hard. The skyline sat behind everything, orange and gray in the September dusk, doing what city skylines do at parties like this, making people feel like their lives were more cinematic than they actually were. Logan had not wanted to come. He had stood in his bathroom 40 minutes earlier, staring at the tie draped over the towel rack, trying to remember the last time he'd worn it. His daughter Maisie had wandered in wearing her pajamas and informed him, with the complete authority of a 7-year-old, that he looked like a substitute teacher trying too hard. "Thanks, Bug," he'd said. "You should wear the blue one." "I only have the one tie." She'd considered this. "Then maybe don't wear a tie." He hadn't worn the tie. Now he stood near the edge of the rooftop with a drink he hadn't touched, watching 200 people he mostly didn't know congratulate a couple he barely did. The groom, Derek something, a finance guy with good shoes and a firm handshake, had been dating the bride for about 18 months. The bride, Claire, worked in Victoria's company. That was the connection. That was why Logan was here. Victoria had asked him to come, which meant he had come. That was the simple math of it, and had been for 11 years. He spotted her across the crowd. She was talking to a small group near the bar, laughing at something, tilting her head back slightly the way she did when something actually struck her as funny rather than just polite. Victoria Sterling was not a performative laugher. She didn't ha-ha for the sake of social comfort. When something was genuinely funny to her, her whole face changed, like a window opening. When it wasn't, she smiled in a way that was perfectly warm and perfectly closed. Logan had spent 11 years learning the difference. She was wearing a dress the color of deep wine, her dark hair pulled back in a way that looked simple, but probably wasn't. She was 30 years old and ran a company of 412 people, and she stood in a crowd the same way she sat at a boardroom table, like she was paying very careful attention to every single thing happening around her while also appearing completely relaxed. Most people found her intimidating. Logan found her exhausting, in the way you find exhausting only the things you love most. He looked away before she could catch him staring. This was a skill he had developed over time. Logan Hayes had not grown up expecting to be someone who needed skills like that. He'd grown up in a small house on the west side with a father who worked long hours and a mother who read paperbacks and made everything from scratch on Sundays. Ordinary, good, quiet. He'd been the kind of kid who was decent at most things and exceptional at none of them. Not athletic enough to be a jock, not disruptive enough to be interesting, not broken enough to be memorable. He graduated high school without incident, started community college without a plan, and met a girl named Rachel during his first semester. Rachel was smart and restless and beautiful, and as it turned out, also not particularly interested in a long-term future with Logan Hayes. What she left behind, 8 months into a relationship that probably should have ended at 4, was a positive pregnancy test and a conversation Logan still remembered word for word even now, 7 years later. He didn't blame her for leaving. He had never been able to manage that particular resentment. She had been 21. He had been 24. Neither of them had been ready, and at least one of them had the self-awareness to say so out loud. He had chosen to stay. Not heroically. He hadn't felt heroic at the time, or most of the time since. He'd felt terrified and underprepared and quietly furious at himself for not having figured any of this out sooner. But Maisie had arrived in February, squirming and red-faced and entirely unimpressed by the world she'd entered, and Logan had looked at her in that hospital room and something had simply locked into place. Whatever else he was going to screw up in his life, this was not going to be one of them. He'd moved back in with his parents for a year, finished his degree online, gotten a job in facilities management for a mid-sized company downtown. Not glamorous, not what he'd imagined, but solid and reliable and the kind of work that let him be home for dinner. He learned how to do laundry at midnight, how to negotiate with a toddler about vegetables, how to run on 5 hours of sleep and not let it show. He learned what it meant to have someone who depended on you completely. He met Victoria 3 years into all of that. She had just been hired as a junior product manager at the same company where he worked. Not his department, not his floor, but they'd ended up at the same table at a mandatory all-staff lunch that both of them had been trying to avoid. She'd been 22 and already looked like she was thinking about 3 things simultaneously. He'd been 25 and had spit up on his collar that he didn't discover until they were already talking. She had not mentioned the spit up. He had liked her immediately for that. They'd started talking about the lunch, then about the company, then about something one of the executives had said that was genuinely idiotic. And by the time the event ended, they had exchanged numbers in the way that felt less like flirting and more like finding someone in a foreign country who spoke your language. Over the following months, they became the kind of friends who texted about nothing, grabbed coffee when their schedules aligned, covered for each other in the small, petty ways that workplace friendships run on. Then Victoria met Maisie. Logan had been in a bind. His sitter had canceled, his mother was unavailable, and he had to pick Maisie up from daycare, but couldn't leave early enough to get back for a meeting. Victoria had offered to handle it with a casualness that suggested she did this kind of thing all the time, though as far as he knew, she had zero experience with children. She had shown up at the daycare, introduced herself to the staff, and somehow convinced a suspicious 3-year-old to come with her without incident. "How did you manage that?" he'd asked, genuinely baffled. "I told her you sent me because you were busy saving a baby raccoon." A raccoon. She seemed like a raccoon kid. Maisie had talked about the raccoon story for 2 weeks, and after that, Victoria Sterling had become a fixed point in both of their lives. The person Maisie asked for by name, the person Logan called when something went sideways, the person who showed up without being asked and left without making it a thing. Somewhere in the 3rd or 4th year of that, Logan had understood what the feeling was. He'd sat with it alone for a long time. Then he'd decided, with the practical fatalism of someone who'd learned to manage difficult truths, that acting on it was not an option. Victoria was his best friend. She was Maisie's favorite person. She was building something significant with her career and did not need a single father with a complicated history deciding that he was in love with her. He filed it away. He kept showing up. He learned to be useful instead of honest. 7 more years of that. "You've been staring at the skyline for 20 minutes, Victoria said, appearing beside him. "Either you've developed a very deep relationship with the city of Columbus, or you're hiding from someone. Both, potentially." She took the untouched drink from his hand, looked at it, and handed it back. "This is warm." "I know." "Why are you holding a warm drink?" "It gives me something to do with my hands." She studied him the way she sometimes did, quickly, efficiently, like she was running a fast diagnostic. It used to unsettle him. Now it was just part of how she worked. "You okay?" she asked. "I'm fine. Great party." "It's a mediocre party," she said. Claire looked like she was going to cry twice during the speeches, and Derek's best man is currently trying to explain cryptocurrency to a woman who is clearly a cardiologist and has no interest. Logan looked across the crowd and found the conversation she was describing. The cardiologist had the expression of someone waiting for a bus that was very, very late. "The food's good," he offered. "The food is fine," Victoria said, which from her was a significant concession. They stood together in the easy silence that 11 years produces, the kind that doesn't require filling, that doesn't carry the low-grade anxiety of a silence between people who don't know each other well enough yet. It was one of the things Logan valued most about what they had. He could stand next to Victoria Sterling at a rooftop party on a September evening and not say a single word and feel genuinely like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. That was the problem, really. That specific feeling was the problem. "You didn't have to come," she said. "I told you that. You also told me the food would be better than fine." "I said it might be better than fine. I qualified that." "You absolutely did not qualify that." She turned to face him, and there it was. The real laugh, the one that changed her face. "I feel like I qualified that. You said, and I'm quoting, 'Logan, this venue is incredible. The catering company does these incredible lamb things. You should definitely come.' That is not a qualified statement." I was being enthusiastic. "You misled me about lamb." She was still smiling when she reached over and picked up one of the small hors d'oeuvres from a passing tray, something with pastry and what appeared to be a smear of something, and held it out to him. He took it. Then she picked up another one from his plate. He had accepted the plate from the tray without thinking, and ate it without asking. This was a thing she did, had always done. She ate food off his plate at restaurants, borrowed bites of whatever he was having without preamble, treated his food as community property in a way she never did with anyone else. He'd complained about it for years, mostly theatrically, because the truth was he'd never actually minded. "That was mine," he said. "You still have 3. The principal, you were going to give it to me anyway." She wasn't wrong. He always did. He looked at her. The easy confidence, the slight tilt of her head, the way she was watching the party with that careful attention while also appearing somewhere between amused and slightly above it all. And something loosened in his chest in the way it sometimes did when he let himself look too long, and the words came out before he had done any real accounting of them. "I love you, Victoria." It was a joke. Obviously a joke. The kind of thing you say to your best friend when they steal your food, delivered with the exasperated fondness that their entire friendship ran on. 2 of the people standing nearby laughed. Someone said, "Aw." A woman Logan didn't know said, "That's sweet," in a sentimental voice. Victoria did not laugh. She had picked up her glass. Her hand stopped on the way to her mouth. The color that rose in her face was unmistakable. A flush that started at her jaw and moved upward, quick and involuntary, the kind of thing that had nothing to do with wine or warmth. She turned to look at him. Not the diagnostic look, not the amused look. Something else entirely. Something Logan had never seen aimed at him before. "Can you say that again?" she said. Her voice was quiet. The party noise continued around them. Someone laughed nearby. Music was low and persistent underneath everything. But between the 2 of them, it had gone very still. Logan heard his own heartbeat. The joke was right there. He could finish it. "I love you, you food thief. Give me back my lamb thing." It was right there, and it would have fixed everything, would have smoothed it back into the familiar shape of their friendship, and everyone would have laughed and they would have moved on, and nothing would have had to change. He didn't take it. "Nothing," he said. "Never mind," which was, if anything, worse than the original statement. Victoria set her glass down on the railing behind her. She looked at the crowd for a moment, then back at him, and her expression had shifted into something he couldn't read. Not hurt, not angry. Something more private than either of those. "Logan, it was a joke. It didn't sound like a joke. I was being... Logan." Her voice was low and careful and completely serious. "I need you to not do the thing you do where you make yourself smaller than you actually are and pretend you meant something else." The party continued around them. The cardiologist had extracted herself from the cryptocurrency conversation. Somewhere across the roof, someone started playing a song that was slightly too loud for the space. "Can we go somewhere quieter?" Victoria asked. He should have said no. Or he should have said yes, and then actually addressed the joke as a joke and put the whole thing away cleanly. Instead, he said yes and followed her, and the 11 years followed both of them. There was a side staircase that led to a smaller terrace 1 level down. More of a landing, really, with 2 iron chairs and a planter box full of something that had mostly died in the September heat. It was not romantic. It was a concrete landing with ugly furniture and the sound of the party drifting down from above, which was maybe why what happened there felt real. Victoria sat in one of the chairs and Logan stood with his back against the railing because sitting felt too deliberate, too much like agreeing to something he wasn't sure he was ready to agree to. "You don't have to explain anything," she said. "Great. But I'd like you to." He looked at the dead plant in the planter box. Somewhere above them, someone was giving what sounded like a toast, the words indistinct, the crowd responding with laughter. "I've known you for 11 years, he said finally. "Yes. And I have never—" He stopped, started over. "I'm not good at this." "I know," she said. "I'm asking anyway." Logan rubbed the back of his neck. This was the gesture he made when he was trying to organize something and couldn't find a way in. Maisie had started imitating it recently, which he found both funny and slightly mortifying. "When Rachel left," he said, "I told myself I wasn't going to be that person, the one who falls apart every time something doesn't work. I had Maisie, I had a job, I had—" He gestured vaguely, "a life that needed running. And you showed up in the middle of all of that, and I thought, okay, she's a friend, a good friend, a great friend, and I decided that was what it was going to be." Victoria was watching him, not saying anything. "And then it became—" He exhaled. "More than that. And I knew it, and I decided to just—" He made a gesture that meant something like set it on a shelf and walk away from the shelf. "How long ago did you decide that?" she asked. He looked at her. "About 7 years ago." The silence that followed that particular number was its own kind of statement. 7 years, Victoria said, very quietly. Give or take. She was quiet for a moment. The wind came up and moved her hair slightly, and she didn't fix it, which meant she was thinking about something else. "Can I tell you something?" she said. "Obviously. 6 months ago, when my mother was in the hospital and the Meridian deal was falling apart simultaneously," she paused. "I was drowning. Not the way I tell people I'm overwhelmed, where it's really just a lot and I can manage it. Actually drowning. I hadn't been sleeping, I was making decisions I knew were mistakes, and I kept thinking, I just need to get to the end of this week, and then the end of the next one, and eventually there will be a week that isn't like this." Logan remembered that period. He'd shown up at her office with dinner 3 times in 1 week, brought her mother flowers at the hospital, quietly made a call to her assistant about the Meridian meeting being postponed without being asked to. "You didn't say anything," he said. "I know." She looked at him steadily. "Because you already knew. You saw it without me telling you, and you just—" She shook her head. "You fixed what you could fix, and you didn't make me explain myself, and you didn't make it about you. And one night in the parking garage after I'd been at the hospital for 6 hours, and I finally got back to my car, I just sat there and thought—" She stopped again. "What?" he said. "I thought, if I could call one person right now, it would be Logan. And then I thought, if I could come home to one person, it would also be Logan. And that second thought was—" A small, self-conscious laugh. That second thought was new. The air between them had changed. Not dramatically, not the way it does in movies with swelling music and soft lighting. It had just gotten very specific, very close, the way air does when 2 people are both looking at the same thing at the same time for the first time. "Victoria," he said. "I know this is complicated," she said. "I know we have everything we have. And I know you have Maisie to think about. And I'm not—" She pressed her lips together. "I'm not saying let's blow everything up. I'm just saying that what you said upstairs was not just a joke," he said. "Was it?" He looked at her for a long time. The honest thing and the safe thing were on opposite sides of the room, and he had spent 11 years standing firmly on the side of the safe thing and getting very good at it. "No," he said. "It wasn't a joke." Victoria held his gaze. The party went on above them, indifferent and unaware. They stayed on the landing for 20 minutes longer than they meant to. The conversation that unfolded there wasn't the neat, cathartic kind. It started and stopped and doubled back on itself. Logan said things he immediately wanted to qualify. Victoria asked questions and then answered them herself before he could. At one point, they both started talking simultaneously, and then both stopped simultaneously, and there was a moment of something that wasn't quite laughter, but was adjacent to it. The nervous exhale of two people who know each other well enough to be embarrassed in front of each other. He told her about the night, 4 years ago, when she'd fallen asleep on his couch during a movie, and he'd covered her with a blanket and stood in the doorway of his own living room for probably 3 minutes just watching her sleep, feeling like a complete idiot, because it was the most peaceful he'd felt in months, and all she'd done was fall asleep. She told him about the awards dinner 2 years back, when he'd fixed her necklace clasp backstage because her hands were shaking and she never got nervous. But she was that night, and the feeling of his hands at the back of her neck had made her so thoroughly lose her train of thought that she'd gone to the podium and given half the speech in the wrong order. "I thought that was nerves," he said. "It was," she said. "You." These were things that had happened. They had been there for both of them. Somehow they had passed through those moments as two separate people with two separate interpretations, and now they were sitting on a concrete landing at a party neither of them wanted to attend, and the interpretations had finally matched. Logan's phone buzzed. He glanced at it. His mother, checking on Maisie's bedtime, which he'd asked her to handle tonight. She wants to know if she can watch one more episode. Also, she found a frog in the backyard and is naming it. He exhaled through his nose. "Maisie," he explained, showing Victoria the screen. Victoria read it, and the expression that crossed her face was something warm and unhurried. She had that look sometimes when Maisie came up. Not the careful professional expression or the guarded social one, but something softer. Something that had never quite registered to him as significant before. It registered now. "What's she naming the frog?" Victoria asked. Knowing Maisie, probably something completely unexpected, like Gerald. "That's an excellent frog name." He texted back, "One episode, no frog in the house." 3 seconds later, "What if it gets lonely?" He showed Victoria. She laughed, the real laugh. They went back upstairs 10 minutes later, not because either of them was ready to, but because staying down there any longer felt like a decision they hadn't quite agreed to yet. They moved through the party differently than they'd arrived. Not touching, not announcing anything, but something had shifted in the particular gravity between them, and a few people noticed, in the way people notice things they've been waiting to notice for a long time. Claire, the bride, pulled Victoria into a hug near the bar and said something in her ear that made Victoria glance over at Logan with an expression that was half embarrassed and entirely unguarded. Logan accepted congratulations from Derek's best man, the cryptocurrency guy, for reasons he didn't entirely follow and chose not to examine. An hour later, when the party had thinned and the string lights had taken on a slightly melancholy quality, they found each other near the door. "I should get home," Logan said. "Check on Maisie. Make sure the frog hasn't gotten inside." "Good priority." "Are you okay?" he asked. Not the social version of the question, the real one. Victoria looked at him in the way she sometimes did when she was deciding how honest to be. "Terrified," she said. "Yeah. Also, she paused. "Also kind of relieved?" "Yeah," he said. "That too." They stood at the door of the venue on a Thursday night in September with the city going about its life behind them, and 11 years of shared history between them, and no particular plan for what came next. "Logan," she said, "I know. We should—" "I know," he said. "We will." She held his gaze for a moment, and there was that look again, the unguarded one. And then she nodded once, like something had been agreed to without needing to be said out loud. He took the elevator down. She stayed for another few minutes to say her goodbyes. In the parking garage, sitting in his car before he started the engine, Logan Hayes put both hands on the steering wheel and stared at the concrete wall in front of him. 7 years of a decision he'd thought was final had just come undone in the space of an evening, over a stolen hors d'oeuvre on a rooftop at a party neither of them had wanted to attend. He thought about the way her face had looked when he said those 4 words. He thought about coming home to one person. He started the car. The drive home took 20 minutes. Maisie was already asleep when he got there, his mother on the couch reading, the frog presumably somewhere in the backyard where frogs belong. He checked on Maisie in the blue quiet of her room, straightened her blanket the way she wouldn't let him do when she was awake, and stood in the doorway for a moment. He thought about what Victoria had said. "I just need to get to the end of this week." He thought about the 3 times he'd shown up at her office with dinner without being asked. He thought about her hands shaking before the award speech, and his at the clasp of her necklace. He went to bed at 11:15 and lay in the dark for a while, not thinking about all the ways this could go wrong, because he was very good at that and had done enough of it for 7 years already. Instead, he thought about the concrete landing and the dead plant and the party noise from above, and the way she'd said terrified and also kind of relieved in the same breath, like those two things lived right next to each other. He thought, yeah, exactly. At 11:43, his phone lit up on the nightstand. Still awake? Victoria. He picked it up. Yes. A pause. The 3 dots appeared. I keep thinking about what you said. Me too, he typed back. Another pause. The dots appeared and disappeared twice. Then, don't go back to pretending it was a joke. Logan looked at the ceiling for a moment. I won't, he wrote. He set the phone back on the nightstand. The room was quiet. Somewhere outside, a car passed on the street below. He didn't sleep for another hour, but it was the good kind of awake. The kind where your mind keeps returning to one particular thing, not because it's a problem, but because it's something you've wanted for a very long time, and you're still getting used to the idea that it might actually be real. That kind of awake. He didn't text her first in the morning. That was deliberate. Not a game. Logan Hayes was not a person who played games, partly by temperament and partly because he didn't have the bandwidth for them, but a choice. He made Maisie's breakfast, drove her to school, sat in the car in the drop-off line for 6 minutes behind a minivan that didn't understand how drop-off lines worked, and the whole time his phone was in his jacket pocket and he did not take it out. Victoria had told him not to pretend it was a joke. He wasn't pretending. He was just trying to figure out what not pretending actually looked like in the morning light, with a 7-year-old complaining about her seatbelt and the radio playing something neither of them liked. He dropped Maisie off at 7:52. She jumped out of the car, backpack swinging, and then stopped and turned back. Dad? Yeah. Did the frog get inside? No. Okay. She considered this briefly. But what if it wanted to? Maisie. School. She went. He watched her disappear through the doors with the specific feeling he got every morning at drop-off. Equal parts relief and a low-grade worry that didn't go away until he picked her up again. It had been like that since she was old enough to walk away from him on her own. He didn't think it would ever completely stop. He pulled out of the parking lot and his phone buzzed. Are you free for lunch? Victoria. He stared at the message at a red light. 3 seconds. Enough time to feel the pull of it and also the familiar counterweight, the voice that had been running in the background for 7 years, patient and persistent, the one that said, careful, careful, careful. Yes, he wrote back. They met at a place they'd been going to for years, a sandwich counter 2 blocks from her office building, 8 tables, no reservations, fluorescent lighting that was not flattering to anyone. It was not the kind of place you went for a significant conversation. It was the kind of place you went because the food was good and you didn't have to think about it, which was maybe the point. Neutral ground that wasn't neutral, familiar in the way that things shared over years become familiar. Victoria was already there when he arrived, sitting at the table in the back corner where they always sat, already holding a paper cup of coffee with both hands. She was in work clothes, a dark blazer, her hair down, and she looked exactly like herself, which was both reassuring and somehow harder than he'd expected. He sat down across from her. Hi, she said. Hi. The woman who worked the counter called out a number and someone went to claim it. The sandwich counter made its sandwich counter sounds. Everything was entirely ordinary. This is weird, Victoria said. A little. It shouldn't be weird. It's the same table. I know. We've sat at this table probably 100 times. At least. She set down her coffee. Looked at him. Okay, I'm just going to say it. Last night, I went home and I couldn't sleep, and I spent about 2 hours being very reasonable with myself about why this is probably complicated, and we should think carefully and make sure we're not... She stopped. And then I thought about what you said on that landing, and I stopped being reasonable. Logan had his coat half off. He finished taking it off, set it on the chair beside him. What did being unreasonable look like? Like seriously considering texting you at midnight. You did text me at midnight. I know, she said. That was after the unreasonable part. The midnight text was the tame version. He looked at her. The fluorescent light was genuinely unforgiving, and she still managed to look like herself. Slightly guarded, slightly amused, the tightness around her eyes that meant she was less comfortable than she was presenting. He knew her face. That was the thing. He knew it the way you know a place you've lived in for years. Not just the large features, but the small ones. The way a certain expression meant she was choosing her words. The way a different set of the same muscles meant she'd already made a decision she hadn't announced yet. She'd already made a decision she hadn't announced yet. Victoria, he said. I know this changes things, she said. Faster now, the careful pacing dropping. I know you have Maisie to think about, and I'm not. I want you to know I've thought about that too. If this goes badly, it's not just us. It's Maisie, and I know she's your whole. Hey, he said. She stopped. I know, he said. I've thought about all of that too. For 7 years I've thought about all of that. That's partly why I didn't say anything. And now? He looked at her for a moment. The sandwich counter, the fluorescent light, the paper cup between her hands. Now I'm sitting across from you at the same table we've sat at 100 times, he said, and I'm thinking that I've spent 7 years being very responsible about this, and I'm not sure responsible is working anymore. Victoria was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Define not working. You told me last night that you thought about coming home to someone. To me, specifically. I did say that. And I have thought, he paused, because this was the part that was harder to say, the part that went past the admission on the landing into something more specific and therefore more exposing. I have thought about what it would be like to not come home to an empty house, not in a sad way, in a wanting way, she said. Yes. She looked down at her coffee, then back up. That's what I meant too. The woman at the counter called another number. I'm scared, Logan said. Not the soft version of scared, the actual version. I want to be honest with you because I think I owe you that. I'm genuinely scared. Not because I don't want this, because I do, and that means there's something real to lose. Victoria nodded slowly. I'm scared too. She didn't say it like a reassurance. She said it like a fact. I run a company. I make decisions that affect 400 people, and I'm reasonably good at that. But this, she shook her head, this I don't know how to be strategic about, and I don't think I should be. No, he agreed. So what do we do? Logan thought about it, really thought about it, not the reflexive back and forth, but the actual question. What do two people do when they've spent 11 years building a friendship and 400 words on a concrete landing have changed the shape of it? I think, he said carefully, we start by stopping the thing where we pretend we haven't already answered this. Victoria looked at him for a long moment. Then she reached across the table and took his hand. Not dramatically, not like a movie. She just put her hand over his on the table in the straightforward way of someone who had decided something and was done deliberating about it. His first instinct was the one from 7 years of practice. The instinct to be careful, to qualify, to make sure they both understood that this was provisional and complicated and needed to be handled properly. He let that instinct sit there without acting on it. Okay, he said. Okay, she said. They ordered sandwiches. They ate them. It was the same table and the same fluorescent light and the same woman at the counter, and nothing about the room had changed, and something between the two of them had. They talked, not about the relationship, not about logistics or boundaries or careful plans, just the way they always talked, the mix of her work and his work, and Maisie's frog situation, and a story Victoria told about a disastrous meeting that morning where a junior VP had made a presentation with a critical typo in the title slide that nobody mentioned for 25 minutes. It felt, to Logan's relief and mild confusion, mostly like lunch. Mostly. The difference was the hand on the table, and then the absence of it when they both needed their hands back, and the awareness of that absence, which was itself a kind of presence. The difference was a warmth that had been there for years and was now slightly repositioned, not removed from friendship, not replaced by something else, just acknowledged. given a name. It turned out that was a significant difference. He didn't tell anyone that day. Maisie, obviously, was not going to be told anything. Not yet. Not until there was something concrete enough to explain to a 7-year-old without creating expectations or confusion. He thought about this seriously on the drive home from pickup. Maisie loved Victoria without reservations, which was both the best possible foundation and also an argument for being careful. She was 7. She processed love as permanent. He was not going to put someone in her life as a specific kind of person until he was reasonably sure that person intended to stay in that specific capacity. Victoria had said she'd thought about Maisie. He believed her. Victoria didn't say things she hadn't thought about. Still, the person he would normally talk to about something like this was Victoria. That was the particular irony of their situation, and it wasn't lost on him. He was navigating a new development in his most important friendship without access to the person he'd always processed important things with. He called his friend Marcus instead. Marcus Reedy had known Logan since before Maisie, which made him one of a small number of people who'd watched the entire arc. Rachel leaving, Maisie arriving, Logan rebuilding, Victoria appearing and becoming embedded in a way that Marcus had been commenting on for at least 5 years. The phone rang twice. "You finally told her," Marcus said before Logan could start. "How?" "Because you only call me when something has actually happened. If it was nothing, you'd text. What finally broke you?" Logan briefly explained the party, the food, the 4 words, the landing. There was a pause. "A rooftop party." "Yes." "Because she stole an appetizer." "A hors d'oeuvre, technically." "Logan." "What?" "Only you," Marcus said, with a warmth that was mostly affectionate and only slightly mocking. 11 years and it was a hors d'oeuvre. I didn't plan it. Clearly. A pause. "How do you feel?" "Terrified." "Sure." "And?" Logan thought about the hand on the table, the fluorescent light, the absence that had its own presence. "Like I've been holding my breath for 7 years," he said, "and I just breathed." Marcus was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, the mocking quality was gone. "Good," he said. "It's about time." Victoria called him at 9:15 that night. He was on the couch after Maisie went to bed, doing nothing in particular. A half-hearted attempt at a show he'd seen the first 20 minutes of 4 separate times without finishing. When her name came up on his phone, he answered it immediately, which was different from how he'd answered her calls before, only in that he was aware of it being different. "Hi," he said. "Hi." A small pause. "I told Diane." Diane Okafor was Victoria's second-in-command and close friend, the COO who'd been with her company since the beginning, and who had been, by Logan's understanding, flagging the obvious about them for at least 3 years. What did she say? She said, and I am quoting directly, "Finally, I have been watching you two at every company event for 3 years, and it was genuinely painful." That sounds like Diane. She also said she's adding it to the company newsletter. She's not serious. "She's definitely not serious," Victoria said. 60% not serious. He heard her moving around in her apartment, the sounds of someone settling in for the evening, a cabinet, something set on a counter. He knew what her apartment sounded like. He'd been there hundreds of times. That knowledge felt different tonight, more specific in a way he couldn't quite articulate. "Are you okay?" he asked. "Yes." Then, "I keep waiting to feel like I made the wrong decision and it's not happening." "Should that worry you?" A rational person would say no. "Are you being rational about this?" A beat. "Not particularly, you?" "Not even slightly." She laughed. "The real one. Quiet at this hour. Just slightly helpless at the edges." "That's probably fine," she said. "Probably?" He heard her settle. Couch or chair, he thought chair. And for a moment they were both quiet in the way they'd been quiet at the party. The comfortable kind. "Logan," she said. "Yeah, I want to do this right. I want—" She paused, and he could hear her choosing words the way she sometimes did with things that mattered, the careful internal editing. "I want to not rush it. I want us to actually date," he said. Date, she agreed, like the word felt slightly unusual in her mouth. Is that too? No, he said. No, I think that's exactly right. Another quiet. So, she said. So, would you want to? She stopped, made a small sound that might have been a laugh at herself. I'm about to formally ask you on a date, which is the most I have ever felt like a teenager in recent memory. Do it anyway. Would you want to have dinner this week? Not lunch, not the sandwich place. Dinner. An actual... Yes, he said. I hadn't finished asking. Yes, anyway. Logan. Victoria. A pause. And then she laughed again, and the evening warmth of that sound moved through the phone and through the room where he was sitting, and he let it. Friday, she said. I'll find somewhere. Okay. Somewhere with actual lighting. The sandwich place has lighting that makes everyone look like they're in an interrogation room. I'm finding somewhere with actual lighting. I thought you looked fine. There was a beat of silence that had a particular quality to it. The quality of a statement that's landed differently than the speaker expected, and both people know it. Thank you, she said, slightly quieter. Sorry, was that? No, she said. That was... No, don't apologize. He didn't apologize. They stayed on the phone for another 40 minutes, talking about things that had nothing to do with the central subject and everything to do with it. The way phone conversations work when there's an undercurrent that doesn't need to be constantly surfaced to be constantly present. She told him about a problem she'd been trying to solve with one of her team leads, who was talented but completely disorganized in a way that was starting to affect the people who reported to him. Logan suggested an approach he'd used with a facilities supervisor in a similar situation. Victoria said that might actually work, and that she was irritated she hadn't thought of it herself. He said she would have. She said eventually. He told her about Maisie's recent announcement that she wanted to be a marine biologist. She doesn't know what a marine biologist is, Victoria pointed out. She knows it has to do with sharks, which she learned about from a documentary I probably shouldn't have let her watch. What was the documentary? The one about the teeth. Logan, there are several documentaries about the teeth. The specific teeth one. Victoria was quiet for a moment. She's seen that documentary? I turned it off, but she'd already committed the main facts to memory. Of course she had. And there it was again, that warm, unhurried thing in Victoria's voice when Maisie came up. Logan had noticed it at the sandwich counter, and he was noticing it again now. She'd said she'd thought about Maisie. He believed her completely. They got off the phone at 11. He lay in the dark for a while, not anxious this time, just awake in the way you're awake when something you've been carrying has changed weight. Still there, but distributed differently, resting somewhere that didn't strain. The week moved the way weeks do when you're waiting for one thing inside of them. Slightly uneven, other events oddly insubstantial by comparison. He replaced a bank of overhead lights in the office building on Wednesday. He took Maisie to her swim class on Thursday morning and stood at the edge of the pool watching her splash through the lanes with the absolute determination of someone who would not be described as naturally graceful but made up for it in sheer persistence. She was like that with most things. He didn't know where she'd gotten it. Sometimes he looked at her and couldn't see either himself or Rachel in particular, just Maisie, entirely her own category. Victoria texted him on Thursday afternoon to confirm dinner and send him the name of the restaurant. He looked it up. It had good reviews and actual lighting. He asked Marcus if he owned anything appropriate to wear. Marcus came over Thursday night, looked through Logan's closet, and said, "We're going shopping," with the flat certainty of someone who had assessed the situation and made a judgment. "I have clothes," Logan said. "You have shirts for work and shirts for not work, and one blazer you've worn twice. This is different. It's dinner. It's your first date with the woman you've been in love with for 7 years." Marcus turned from the closet. "We're going shopping." They went. Logan came home with a shirt he'd never have picked himself that Marcus insisted looked better, and stood in front of his bathroom mirror when he got home feeling the same mild absurdity he'd felt a week ago with the tie. Maisie wandered in. "Are you going somewhere?" "Friday. I have dinner." She considered the shirt. "Is it with Victoria?" He looked at her in the mirror. What makes you say that? She shrugged in the way 7-year-olds shrug, which manages to convey both total innocence and complete awareness simultaneously. Just asking, she said. Yes, he said. It's with Victoria. Maisie nodded. She looked at the shirt again, with the appraising attention she normally reserved for serious matters. You should wear the shirt, she said. Then she walked out of the bathroom. Logan looked at himself in the mirror for another moment. Marsam. Friday came. He drove to the restaurant, a place in a converted warehouse space near the Arts District, warm light through industrial windows, not trying too hard but clearly aware of what it was doing. He was there at 7:02. Victoria was there at 7:03. She was wearing the kind of dress that looked like it was dressed down, but wasn't. A deep green that he noticed immediately, and then looked away from, and then looked back at. Her hair was down. She was carrying a small bag and had the look she got when she was slightly nervous and didn't want it to be visible. He knew the look. He met her at the door. Hi, she said. Hi. For a moment, they both just stood there, which would have been awkward with anyone else and was only slightly awkward with them. The brief uncertainty of two people navigating a familiar dynamic in an unfamiliar configuration. Your shirt is good, she said. Thank you. Marcus picked it. Tell Marcus he has taste. He'll be insufferable about it. He's earned it. They went inside. The host showed them to a table by the window. Actual warm lighting, the city visible through the glass. They sat across from each other. And here was the thing that Logan hadn't entirely anticipated. It wasn't effortless. Not awkward, but not effortless either. There were a few minutes where the conversation had a slight formality to it that their conversations almost never had. The specific stiffness of two people who know each other very well, trying to figure out the protocols of a new situation. He ordered the wrong thing first and changed it, which he never did. She started a sentence twice without finishing it, which she almost never did. At some point, the bread arrived, and without thinking, she took a piece from his plate, old habit, 11 years of it, and they both noticed simultaneously, and she looked at him, and he looked at her, and they both started laughing at the same time. Not the polite version, the real version. The slightly embarrassing, slightly relieved version that comes from releasing something you'd been holding without realizing. There we are, she said. There we are. After that, it was better. Not perfect. The evening still had the particular self-consciousness of something new, the awareness of being in a specific kind of moment. But the laughter had cut through the formality, and underneath it, they were still, unmistakably, themselves. They stayed for 3 hours. She told him about her first week at the company, before it was her company, the specific terror of having a vision and no resources and a team that was watching to see if she was real or performing. He told her about the week after Rachel left, the specific practical terror of a 24-year-old trying to figure out how to be a single parent before he'd finished being a person in his own right. He had never told her that story in quite that way. She had known the outline. She hadn't known the details. The specific night, the phone call, the way he'd sat in his kitchen at 2 a.m, making a list of things he didn't know how to do. She listened the way she listened to things that mattered. You never told me that, she said. No. Why? He thought about it honestly. Because I'd already filed it under handled, he said. And I didn't want you to think I was... He shook his head. I didn't want you to see me as someone you needed to worry about. Victoria looked at him for a moment. You let me fall apart in front of you, during the Meridian thing, during my mother's surgery. That's different. How? He opened his mouth and found he didn't have a good answer. Logan, she said, and her voice had a different quality now, direct in the way she was direct when something mattered and she wasn't going to let it go. You can fall apart in front of me too. I want that to be something you know. He looked at the table, then at her. I'm working on it. I know. She said it without judgment. I can see that. I'm just saying, I'm not going anywhere. The words sat between them for a moment, simple and weighted at the same time. He reached across the table. She took his hand, same as she had at the sandwich counter. No ceremony, just the fact of it. I'm not going anywhere either, he said. Outside the window, the city moved in the way cities do on Friday nights, indifferent and alive. Their food had long since been finished. The table had that comfortable end-of-dinner state where neither person is in a hurry to leave. "So," Victoria said. "So. This was a date." "I believe it was." She looked at him with an expression that was trying to be composed and not quite succeeding. "I'd like to do it again." "Yeah," Logan said. "Me too." The check came. They argued briefly about it in the way they'd argued about checks for 11 years. Not seriously, just the familiar back and forth. And he paid it, and she made a note that she was getting the next one, which implied there was a next one, which they both already knew. They walked out into the evening air, the city doing its city things around them. He drove her home. She got out of the car at her building and turned back, one hand on the door, and looked at him in the way that was still slightly new. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For saying it," she said, "even if you thought it was a joke." "It wasn't a joke." "I know." She held his gaze for a moment. "Good night, Logan." "Good night, Victoria." She closed the door. He watched her go into the building. He pulled away from the curb and the city moved around him, and something in his chest that had been braced for a very long time was slowly, carefully, learning how to let itself down. The second date was easier than the first, and the third was easier than the second, and somewhere around the fourth, Logan stopped counting them as dates and started thinking of them as just evenings. Time that belonged to a different category than it used to. They fell into a rhythm that felt both new and, in its underlying structure, entirely familiar. Friday evenings when Logan's mother could take Maisie. The occasional weeknight dinner when Maisie was at a friend's house. Long phone calls after 9 when the quiet settled. The texture of their friendship was still there. The argument about a movie she liked and he found overrated. The running commentary on the cryptocurrency best man, who had apparently asked Claire's college roommate for her number and been politely declined. But something else was layered on top of it now, or maybe underneath it. A warmth that didn't pretend to be something other than what it was. Logan was not accustomed to not pretending. He was working on it. One evening in mid-October, 3 weeks after the restaurant, Victoria came over for dinner. This had happened many times before. She'd eaten at his table dozens of times, helped Maisie with homework on his couch, fallen asleep on that same couch on at least 4 separate occasions. But this time Maisie was home, and Maisie was 7. And Maisie had the specific observational intelligence of someone who processed the world by watching adults very carefully and drawing her own conclusions. Logan had made pasta. Not because pasta was impressive, but because he could make it without thinking, and he wanted to have enough attention free to handle whatever the evening required. Victoria arrived at 6:30 with a bottle of sparkling water in a small paper bag she handed to Maisie at the door. Maisie looked inside. "Gummy sharks." "I heard about the documentary," Victoria said. "The teeth one." "The teeth one." Maisie looked at the bag, then at Victoria, with the expression she wore when something had exceeded her expectations. "These are the good ones," she said, with a gravity that suggested she'd done prior research on the matter. "Not the cheap kind." "I know the difference," Victoria said. Maisie nodded, apparently satisfied, and went to put the bag in what she considered a secure location, which was under her pillow. Logan watched this exchange from the kitchen doorway and said nothing. Dinner was unremarkable in the best possible way. Maisie talked about sharks for approximately 12 minutes, transitioned without warning into a detailed account of a conflict between 2 of her classmates that had something to do with a shared pencil case, and then asked Victoria what it was like to be the boss of a whole company. "Mostly it means I have a lot of meetings," Victoria said. Maisie considered this. "That sounds boring." "It is, sometimes." "Then why do you do it?" Victoria looked briefly at Logan, then back at Maisie. "Because sometimes things that are hard and boring are still worth doing." Maisie ate a forkful of pasta and seemed to find this acceptable. Later, while Maisie was doing what she described as pre-sleeping, a transitional state between awake and asleep that involved lying in bed with her eyes mostly closed and occasionally asking questions through the wall, Logan and Victoria washed dishes. Not romantic. Just 2 people standing at a kitchen sink with wet hands and the low sound of the television in the other room passing plates back and forth. "She's something," Victoria said. "She's Maisie," Logan said, as if that covered the full scope of it. She asked me this week, when we talked on the phone, whether frogs hibernate. Logan turned to look at her. She called you? She called me to ask about the frog. Apparently she'd Googled it but wanted a second opinion. Victoria handed him a wet bowl. I told her I didn't know, but we could find out together. You don't have to. I know, Victoria said. I wanted to. He dried the bowl. She calls you, he said. She calls me. He thought about that for a moment. Maisie had been calling Victoria for years. That wasn't new. But there was something about the image of his daughter picking up a phone to ask about frog hibernation specifically with Victoria that settled into his chest and stayed there. Logan, Victoria said. Yeah. I need you to know that I'm not scared of this part. She said it with a directness that was entirely her. No preamble, no softening. I know you worry about it. I know you think about what it means to bring someone into Maisie's life in a specific way. And I want you to know, I'm not going to treat her like a complication. I know that, he said. I'm saying it out loud anyway. He put the dried bowl away, leaned back against the counter. She already loves you, he said. I know, I love her too. Victoria said it simply, like a fact she'd been aware of for some time. I'm just making sure you know I've thought about what that means. From the bedroom, Maisie's voice came through the wall. Dad, do frogs dream? I don't know, Bug. A pause. Victoria, do frogs dream? Victoria looked at Logan. Logan spread his hands in a gesture that meant she's all yours. That's a question for the scientists, Victoria said toward the wall. Are you a scientist? Not that kind. A pause. What kind are you? The kind with a lot of meetings. A long silence. Then, okay, good night. Good night, Maisie. Logan exhaled. Does she do that every night? Victoria asked quietly. The through-the-wall questions? Every single night. Victoria smiled. Not the composed professional smile. The actual one. His son. November arrived, and with it the specific busyness that Victoria's company ran on in the fourth quarter. Product reviews, budget cycles, a conference she had to attend in Chicago for 4 days. Logan texted her the morning she left, something short and ordinary, and she responded from the airport with a photo of the worst coffee she'd ever seen. He kept the photo. He wasn't going to examine that too closely. She called each evening from Chicago, and on the second night she sounded tired in the way she got when she'd been managing people for too many consecutive hours. A flatness under the words, the careful control that came out when she was running low. How was the panel? He asked. Fine. Good, actually. One of our competitors did a presentation that confirmed we're about 18 months ahead of them, which was accidentally the best part of the whole day. Accidentally. I may have read their slide deck in the elevator. Victoria. It was in the shared folder, she said, without particular remorse. He heard her moving around in what was probably a hotel room. The small sounds of someone unwinding from a day they were glad was over. How's Maisie? She asked. She's decided the frog has moved on. She said, and I quote, Gerald has a life, Dad. A pause. She named it Gerald. Of course she did. Victoria laughed. The tired version, but real. I've been thinking about Gerald all week, she said. How is that possible? Maisie's effect on people. Does she know she does it? No, Logan said. That's part of why it works. A quiet on the line. The comfortable kind, but with a different quality tonight. The distance made it slightly more deliberate. The silence filled in a way that proximity sometimes didn't require. I miss you, she said. It was the first time she'd said that exactly. Not, I'll see you when I'm back or can't wait to be home. The direct thing. I miss you too, he said. Another quiet. 2 more days, she said. 2 more days. She came home Saturday. He picked her up from the airport without being asked. She hadn't asked, but he'd texted to say he was coming, and she'd sent back a single response that conveyed the specific relief of someone who'd been managing everything alone for 4 days, and was very glad not to have to manage one more thing. She came through the arrivals door with her carry-on and the expression of someone done with airports and travel and 4 days of being professionally impressive. and when she saw him, the expression shifted into something that he was only recently letting himself look at directly. "Hi," she said. "Hi." He took the carry-on from her. She let him. "You didn't have to come." "I know." They walked to the car. She got in, closed her eyes for about 30 seconds, and then opened them again. "Okay," she said. "I'm human again." "Take your time." She glanced at him sideways. "I brought Maisie something from the conference. It's a very small stuffed dolphin. She's going to love it." I know she was more interested in sharks, but they didn't have sharks. She'll promote dolphins. She's been reconsidering the whole marine biology thing anyway, apparently. Now she's interested in volcanoes. Victoria turned to look at him. That escalated. It's been 4 days. She covers ground fast. They drove out of the airport and into the Saturday morning traffic, and Victoria looked out the window with the low exhaustion of someone returning from an absence, watching the city come back into frame. "Thank you for the calls," she said, still looking out the window. "You can always call me." "I know, She turned toward him. It made it easier, being there. He glanced at her. She was looking at him with the unguarded expression she'd been letting him see more of lately. The one that sat underneath the professional composure. The one he suspected very few people got consistently. "That's the idea," he said. She reached over and put her hand on his arm, briefly, and then left it there for the rest of the drive. Ito. The problem started at the beginning of December, which meant it started quietly, the way the worst things usually do. Logan had been managing a significant facilities upgrade at work, a full HVAC overhaul on 2 floors of a commercial building, the kind of project that required constant coordination with contractors, building management, and tenants, who all had different and competing ideas about how disruptive was acceptable. He'd been on site more than usual, coming home later, the kind of tired that didn't fully lift overnight. On a Wednesday evening, he came home to a voicemail from Maisie's school. Not an emergency. The school was careful to say that at the start. Not an emergency. But Ms. Pryor, Maisie's second-grade teacher, would like to schedule a call or meeting at his earliest convenience. Maisie had been having some difficulty with focus lately, and she'd also had a crying episode at recess that she declined to explain. Logan stood in his kitchen with his coat still on and listened to the voicemail twice. He called back immediately. Ms. Pryor was still in the building. She was kind and specific. Maisie had been distracted for the past couple of weeks, not completing tasks in the normal time frame, a little withdrawn at lunch. The crying at recess had been brief, and she'd recovered quickly. She wasn't worried. Maisie was a strong student and clearly a sensitive kid, but she thought Logan should know. "Has there been any changes at home?" Ms. Pryor asked. The question landed the way that particular question always did, with the weight of everything it might encompass. "Not anything she would be aware of," Logan said carefully. "Sometimes kids pick up on things before we realize they're picking up on things," Ms. Pryor said. Not unkindly. He thanked her. He got off the phone. He stood in the kitchen for a while. The thing was, he didn't think Maisie was troubled by what was happening between him and Victoria. She'd seemed, if anything, pleased about the Friday dinner, pleased about the gummy sharks, pleased about the through-the-wall conversation about frogs and dreams. But the last couple of weeks Logan had been stretched thin and tired and present in body only some evenings, and maybe that was it. Or maybe it was something else entirely, something at school or with a friend, something that had nothing to do with him. He went to check on Maisie. She was at the kitchen table doing homework with the specific posture of someone who would rather be doing literally anything else. "Hey, Bug." "Hi," without looking up. He sat down across from her. "How was school?" "Fine." "What happened at recess?" Her pencil slowed. She didn't look up. "Nothing," she said. Ms. Pryor called. A pause. The pencil stopped. "I just got sad," Maisie said, in the particular voice of someone reporting a fact they don't fully understand. "I don't know why. I just got sad and then I wasn't sad." "That happens sometimes," he said. "Does it happen to you?" He thought about being honest. "Yeah," he said. "It does." She seemed to find this acceptable. She went back to her homework. He made dinner. He watched her through the kitchen doorway.
The focused attention she brought to her worksheet, the way she chewed on the end of her pencil despite being told not to. She was fine. She was also 7, and sometimes sad without knowing why, and that was real, and he wasn't going to make it either larger or smaller than it was. But he sat with it through the evening. He texted Victoria at 9. Maisie had a hard day. Minor thing. Just sitting with it. She responded in 3 minutes. Do you want to talk? Thought about it. Not tonight. Tomorrow? Of course. Call me whenever.
Then, a minute later, she okay? She's okay. She just got sad. A pause. Give her a hug from me. He did, the next morning at breakfast, without explaining its origin. Maisie accepted it with the cheerful practicality of someone who had decided overnight that the sad had in fact passed. Can we get pancakes? She asked, into his shoulder. On a Thursday? Is pancakes only on weekends? Is pancakes only on weekends? Logan repeated. Is it? It was not apparently only on weekends. He met Victoria for lunch on Thursday. The sandwich place, same table, same fluorescent light. He'd been there often enough in the last 2 months that the woman behind the counter had started having his order ready before he reached the register. He told her about the school call, not anxiously, just the facts of it. What Ms. Pryor had said, what Maisie had said, his own uncertainty about what had caused it. Victoria listened in the complete way she listened, not jumping ahead, not offering solutions while he was still talking. What's your read on it? She asked when he finished. Honestly, I think she's mostly fine. She's a sensitive kid and she was having a hard day and she didn't have the vocabulary for it, so she cried. He moved his coffee cup slightly. But I've been stretched thin at work. I don't think I've been fully present in the evenings for the last couple weeks. You think she felt that? I think kids always feel that, whether or not they can name it. But Victoria was quiet for a moment. What are you going to do? I'm going to ease up on the project hours next week. I have someone who can cover more of the on-site stuff. I'll be home earlier. He paused. I'm also going to ask her directly what's going on with her friends. I think there might be something there, but she's not ready to talk about it. Smart, Victoria said. Then, you're really good at this. I make it up as I go. That's what good parenting is. He shook his head. I don't know about that. Logan, her voice was even. You came home, heard the voicemail, called the teacher back immediately, sat down with her, didn't panic, made dinner, and you're already problem-solving at the cause level instead of just the symptom. She held his gaze. You're good at it. He looked at the table, looked back at her. She asked me if being sad randomly happened to me, he said. What did you tell her? The truth. Victoria smiled, small and certain. Good. They ate their sandwiches. Outside the window, the lunch crowd moved on the sidewalk, coats on now, the city having committed to winter. I want to tell you something, Victoria said. He looked at her. She stopped, started over. I've been doing a thing where I hold back. Not with you, not with the big things, but with the smaller ones. She looked at him steadily. I keep catching myself not saying things because I don't want to make this more complicated than it needs to be. What kind of things? She considered. Like the fact that when you told me Maisie was sad last night, the first thing I wanted to do was go over there. Not because you needed me to. I knew you had it handled just because... She paused. I wanted to be there, and I stopped myself because it felt like too much. The sentence sat between them. Victoria, he said, I know she's not mine to... That's not... He stopped. That's not the way I'm thinking about this. She looked at him. How are you thinking about it? He tried to find the accurate version. I think, he said slowly, that the thing I've been most careful about is not letting Maisie get attached to something that might not stay. Because once she's attached, he shook his head. She loves with her whole self. She doesn't hold anything back. I know, Victoria said quietly, which means the only question is whether it's safe for her to. A long pause. The kind that has something moving in it. I'm not going anywhere, Victoria said. She'd said it before. It landed differently now, in daylight, at a sandwich counter, without the cover of a romantic evening or the dim warmth of a restaurant. Just plain statement, just the fact of it. Logan looked at her. I know, he said, but you needed to say it out loud. Yeah, I did. She reached across the table. He took her hand. They sat like that for a moment in the fluorescent light of a place with no pretension at all, two people who'd been circling something for a long time and were now standing still inside it. December moved quickly in the way December always did. Logan finished the HVAC project ahead of schedule, which his supervisor noted and his team celebrated with a combination of relief and pizza. He was home for dinner 5 evenings that week, and Maisie's mood lifted in the low-key way that moods lift when the thing causing them is removed without being named. On the second Saturday, he took Maisie to a science exhibit at the Natural History Museum. Volcanoes, as it turned out, had a whole section, which Maisie navigated with the focus of someone conducting research. She stood in front of a cross-section model for 4 minutes, reading every word of the placard with her brow pulled together. "The magma is already under there," she announced. "Yeah," Logan said. "It's always been under there." "That's right." She thought about this. "We're just standing on top of it." "We are." She seemed to find this more interesting than alarming, which Logan took as a good sign about her general disposition. They got lunch in the museum cafe, and Maisie constructed an elaborate dipping sauce situation with her chicken fingers. While she was doing this, she said, without looking up, "Is Victoria coming to Christmas?" Logan set down his coffee. "I don't know," he said. "She came last year." "She did." Maisie looked up. "Is she coming this year?" The question was entirely matter of fact. No agenda in it, no test. Just information gathering. Logan thought about Ms. Pryor's words. Sometimes kids pick up on things before we realize they're picking up on things. And also about what Victoria had said at the sandwich counter, about holding herself back. "Do you want her to?" he asked. Maisie looked at him with the expression she sometimes wore that reminded him she was occasionally smarter than people gave her credit for. "Yes," she said. "Then I'll ask her." Maisie nodded, satisfied, and returned to her dipping sauce architecture. Logan picked up his phone and sent a text under the table like a teenager. "Maisie wants to know if you're coming to Christmas." 3 minutes passed. "What do you want?" He looked across the table at his daughter, who was now conducting what appeared to be a structural experiment on whether a chicken finger could stand upright in the sauce. "Same thing she does," he typed back. The response was fast this time. Then, yes. He put his phone away. Maisie looked up. "Is she coming?" "She's coming." Maisie nodded again. Then she knocked her chicken finger over, assessed the result, and started rebuilding without comment. The complication that Logan had not anticipated arrived 9 days before Christmas, on a Thursday evening, in the form of a phone call he didn't recognize. He let it go to voicemail. Checked it 20 minutes later, standing in his kitchen after Maisie was in bed. The voice on the recording was a woman's. Professional, measured, identifying herself as a contact from a development firm called Grayline Partners. She was hoping to speak with Mr. Hayes regarding a commercial facilities consultation. A mutual contact had suggested him specifically. Would he be available for a brief call? Logan listened to it twice. He'd heard of Grayline. Anyone in commercial property management in the city had heard of Grayline. They operated on a scale that had nothing to do with his current position, large mixed-use developments, the kind of project that required people with credentials and experience significantly beyond where he currently sat on paper. He'd gone back to school quietly, 18 months ago. Finished a certification program in building systems management he'd been working on for 3 years, part-time, evenings, and weekends. He hadn't told many people. Not because it was a secret, but because the habit of keeping his own ambitions on a short leash was deeply ingrained. The practical management of expectations, his own more than anyone else's. He'd told Victoria. She had been the only person he'd told. He stood in the kitchen and played the voicemail a third time. Then he texted Victoria. "Can I call you? Now?" "Yes." She called him back in 40 seconds. He told her about the voicemail. There was a brief pause. "The certification," she said. "Yeah." "Someone passed your name. You don't know who." "I have a few guesses." He leaned against the counter. "I want to call back. I want to find out what it is." "Then call back," she said. "It might be nothing. It might be completely outside what I'm qualified for right now. Or it might not be." Victoria. Logan, she said, same cadence. You've been doing the work, the certification, the projects, You've been quietly building this for 3 years. Something has to eventually go somewhere with it. He was quiet for a moment. What are you scared of? She asked. He thought about it honestly. That it'll be real, he said. That it'll be a genuine opportunity and I'll have to make a decision about whether I'm actually going to step into it. And if you do? Then I'm not the person who plays it safe anymore. Silence on the line. Then, you haven't been playing it safe since September, she said. You know that, right? He looked at the dark kitchen window, his own reflection, faint, in the glass. Call them back, she said. In the morning? Unless you want to call a development firm at 10:30 at night. Tomorrow, he said. Tomorrow, she confirmed. Then, softer. It's a good thing, Logan. You're allowed to have a good thing. He stayed in the kitchen for a while after they got off the phone, the house quiet around him. In the morning, he would call Gray Line Partners, and whatever the call was, it would be a beginning of something or nothing, and either way, he would handle it. He washed the last of the dinner dishes and turned off the kitchen light. In the dark hallway, from behind Maisie's closed door, came the very small sound of a 7-year-old talking to herself in the particular way that indicated she was not, in fact, sleeping. Maisie. A pause. I'm sleeping. You're talking. In my sleep. Go to sleep. Okay. A beat. Dad? Yeah. Is it bad if a volcano goes off? Not if you're far enough away from it. How far? Very far. A long pause. Okay, she said. Good night. Good night, Bug. He went to bed. The house held its quiet around him, and somewhere under the floor of every ordinary life, the magma turned slowly, reliably, waiting for its time. He called Gray Line Partners at 9:15 the next morning, standing in the parking lot of his office building with his coffee going cold in his hand. The woman who answered was named Carla Voss. She was the director of facilities development, and she spoke with the efficient warmth of someone who had made a lot of these calls and knew how to calibrate them. She thanked him for calling back. She asked if he had 15 minutes. He had 15 minutes. What she described was a consulting engagement. Initial phase, evaluating the system's infrastructure of a mixed-use development Gray Line, was acquiring on the north side of the city. Older building, significant retrofit needs, and they were assembling a small team to assess scope before committing to a full renovation budget. Someone had passed Logan's name as a person who understood both the technical and the operational side of large building systems without needing everything translated into layman's terms. Can I ask who passed my name? Logan said. A brief pause. I was asked to keep that confidential, actually. I hope that's all right. It wasn't entirely all right, but it was also the kind of thing he'd have to live with. The engagement would be 3 weeks of site visits and assessment work. The pay was more than he made in a month at his current job. It was a contract, not a permanent position, which meant he would need to arrange coverage at his regular job or take personal time. It also meant that if he did well, there was language in Carla's description about future projects. He asked the questions he was supposed to ask: scope, timeline, deliverables, reporting structure. She answered them clearly. She asked if he had any concerns about availability. I'll need a few days, he said, to sort out logistics. Of course, she said. We'd want to start after the new year. Take your time. He got off the phone and stood in the parking lot and drank his cold coffee. He called Marcus. The certification paid off, Marcus said, after Logan explained it. Maybe. It's one contract. It's Gray Line. That's not nothing. I know it's not nothing. That's why I'm standing in a parking lot instead of going to work. Marcus was quiet for a second. What's the actual hesitation? Logan thought about what he'd said to Victoria the night before. What if it's the beginning of something that changes everything? Not just the job, the whole... He searched for the word. The architecture of things. Maisie's routine, what I can count on. I've built everything on being steady, and this is... Not steady, Marcus said. Not steady. Logan? Marcus said it in the patient way he had, the way that meant he was going to say something Logan probably already knew. Steady got you through the hard part. Steady kept Maisie safe and kept you functional and got you to the other side. But steady isn't the same thing as staying small. Logan said nothing. You're not 25 anymore, Marcus said. You don't have to build everything around surviving. You're allowed to build toward something. He went inside and did his job. He thought about it all day. That evening, after Maisie was in bed, he called Victoria. I'm going to do it, he said when she picked up. I know, she said. I haven't told you that yet. I know you, she said. I heard it in your voice last night. You'd already decided. A brief pause. I'm glad. I haven't figured out the logistics. You will. You don't know that. I've watched you figure out harder things on fewer resources, she said. Yes, I do. He exhaled. You're annoyingly confident about me. One of us has to be. That's not how confidence works. Sure it is. He heard the smile in it. Tell me about the project. He told her. She asked smart questions about the building's age, about the systems types, about what Carla had said regarding future work. She didn't offer to help in ways he hadn't asked for. She just listened and asked, and at the end said, This is a good thing, Logan. Yeah, he said. Say it like you believe it. This is a good thing. Better. Christmas came on a Thursday that year, which meant Christmas Eve was a Wednesday, which meant Logan spent the 23rd of December doing 3 separate grocery runs because he kept forgetting things and refusing to admit that he should have made a list. His mother arrived Wednesday morning with her particular form of assistance, which meant she immediately started reorganizing the way he'd arranged things in the kitchen while telling him it looked wonderful in a tone that suggested otherwise. His father came in behind her, shook Logan's hand, and went to find a place to sit where he could observe things quietly. His parents had been married for 34 years. They operated as a unit with extremely defined roles. Maisie was in a state of barely controlled excitement that she expressed by being either very loud or completely silent, depending on which way the energy had redirected itself in the last 10 minutes. She'd woken up at 5:45, and Logan had convinced her back to sleep for another 40 minutes by agreeing that yes, there was a theoretical possibility that Gerald the frog had returned to the backyard for Christmas. Victoria arrived at 4:30. She came through the door with a bag of wrapped things and the specific expression of someone who had spent the last 3 days at a company end-of-year event and was glad to be somewhere that wasn't that. She had a thin scarf Logan hadn't seen before, and her hair was loose, and she looked, above all else, like someone who was ready to stop being impressive for the evening. Maisie intercepted her at the door. Did you bring the dolphin? Maisie asked. The dolphin is in the bag, Victoria said. The small one? There's only the one dolphin, Maisie. Maisie seemed to accept this as a reasonable limitation and took the bag with the focused purpose of someone with cataloging to do. Logan's mother watched this exchange from the kitchen doorway and then looked at Logan with the expression she'd been using since September, the one that meant she had been right about something for a very long time and was exercising enormous restraint in not saying so. Mom, Logan said quietly as Victoria crossed to him. I'm not saying anything, his mother said, and went back to the kitchen. Victoria reached him. She's definitely saying things, she said quietly, constantly, without words. It's a skill. His father from his chair. She's been right about you two for 3 years. Dad? Just noting it, Victoria laughed. Logan's father looked pleased with himself in the unhurried way of a man who had learned that most things resolved if you waited long enough. The evening had the texture of something comfortable that was also slightly new, the combination of familiar people in a familiar space, navigating a relationship that had shifted without quite announcing itself to everyone simultaneously. Logan's parents were warm without making it a production. Victoria moved through the house with the ease of someone who'd been there many times, but was also, quietly, registering something different about being there now. Dinner was loud. Maisie sat next to Victoria and spent the meal constructing what she described as a presentation about volcanoes that required Victoria's full attention. Victoria gave it. Not performatively. She asked follow-up questions, challenged a claim Maisie made about lava speed that turned into a good-natured argument resolved by Logan's father pulling out his phone, and at one point the two of them were leaning over the phone together with the same focused expression. Logan watched from across the table. His mother, beside him, said very quietly, "Stop looking at her like that at the dinner table. Mom, you're being obvious." "I'm not." "Logan?" Her voice was gentle. "You've been obvious for years. It's fine to still be obvious." He looked back at his plate. After dinner, after his parents helped with the dishes and made their careful exit, his mother hugging Victoria for slightly longer than a standard goodbye, Logan and Victoria put Maisie to bed together. Not a deliberate decision, just the way it unfolded. Maisie wanted a story, which Victoria offered to read, which led to 20 minutes of Maisie chooses a book, followed by Maisie changes her mind about the book, followed by the actual reading. Victoria read with the expression of someone who had never done this exactly, but was not intimidated by it. She read too fast at first, professional rhythm, and Maisie said slower without ceremony, and Victoria slowed down without comment, adjusting to it the way she adjusted to most things, by paying attention and changing her approach. By the time the chapter ended, Maisie's eyes were mostly closed. "Is Gerald really in the backyard?" she said very quietly. "I genuinely don't know," Victoria said. "But maybe." A long pause. "Okay," Maisie said. "That's enough." They turned off the light and stood in the hallway. "She said that's enough, like she was wrapping up a negotiation," Victoria said very quietly. "That's exactly what it was," Logan said. They went downstairs. The house was quiet now. The good kind of quiet, the kind that follows a full evening. Logan made tea, mostly because it gave him something to do, and they sat on the couch in the living room with the lamp on and the tree lights blinking their slow, slightly irregular pattern. Victoria had her legs pulled up underneath her, holding her mug with both hands, and she looked at the tree with the unfocused expression of someone at the end of a long week who has arrived somewhere they wanted to be. "Thank you for coming," Logan said. "Thank you for asking." Maisie asked. "You texted me." "Maisie told me to." Victoria turned to look at him. "Are you going to take credit for anything tonight?" He smiled. "No." She shook her head, but the expression was the warm one. They sat for a while. Outside, somewhere down the street, someone's Christmas lights blinked on and off in a pattern that suggested a short in the wiring. "My board meets in January," Victoria said. "I know. You mentioned the prep. There's going to be pressure around the Q1 projections. Chen has been—" She stopped, started again. "There's a board member, Richard Chen. He's been on the board since before I took over, and he's been not hostile exactly, skeptical. He questions every growth projection I put in front of him, and I understand that's his job. But lately it's been—" She frowned slightly. "There's a quality to it that's less about the numbers and more about something else." "Like what?" "Like he'd prefer someone else in the seat," she said flatly. Logan looked at her. "Is that a real possibility?" "No," she said, with the certainty of someone who had assessed it. "I have the votes. I know where I stand, but it's—" She pressed her lips together. "It's a particular kind of exhausting to be right about everything and still have to prove it to the same person every quarter. What's he skeptical about, specifically?" "The Harlow expansion. I want to open the Harlow office in March. He thinks we're moving too fast. He's been building a case for delaying it. Cost concerns, market timing, a few things he's framing as risk factors." She turned her mug in her hands. "His concerns aren't entirely wrong. The timing is aggressive. But the window won't hold until June, which is what he'd prefer. What happens if he gets other board members to agree with him? He won't. But it'll cost me 2 weeks of prep work to make sure of that, right when I'm also managing year-end close and the Chicago implementation." She exhaled. "It's manageable. I'm just tired of managing it." "I know," Logan said. "I don't say this to enough people," she said. "I don't usually—" She shook her head. "I have Diane, and I have you. That's mostly it, for actual saying things." "You can always say things." "I know. I'm saying I'm aware that I don't, usually, and I'm trying to do it differently with you." She looked at him directly. "Is that something I'm actually doing?" The question caught him slightly off guard by its specificity. "Yes," he said honestly. "You're doing it differently." She held his gaze for a moment, then nodded once, apparently satisfied with that answer. He put his arm around her. She leaned into it with the ease of someone who had decided not to hold herself at a careful distance anymore. And they sat like that in the lamplight, with the tree doing its irregular blinking and the house quiet around them. "Merry Christmas," she said. "It's the 23rd. I'm getting ahead of it." "Merry Christmas, Victoria," Shrouta. January came in cold and direct, the way January in the Midwest usually did. No easing into it, just winter, committed and unambiguous. Logan started the Gray Line work on the 8th. He'd arranged 3 days a week of coverage at his regular job through the end of January, burning through the last of his personal time with the kind of deliberate expenditure that felt both necessary and slightly vertiginous. The building was on Halford Street, a 12-story mixed use from the early 70s, with the particular combination of bones and problems that old buildings tended to have. Good structure, compromised systems, 40 years of deferred maintenance making the decisions of long-departed facility managers visible in the most inconvenient ways possible. Logan walked every floor the first day with a clipboard and a flashlight, and the specific satisfaction of someone who understood the language a building spoke when it was telling you what it needed. He wrote his first assessment memo on a Tuesday evening at the kitchen table while Maisie did homework across from him. "Are you doing homework too?" Maisie asked. "In a way." She looked at his clipboard. "Does your homework have drawings?" "These are schematics." "What's a schematic?" "A drawing that shows how things connect." She considered this. "Like a map?" "Sort of like a map." She went back to her worksheet. Then, without looking up, "Is your homework hard?" "Some of it." "Mine is hard," she said. "What's hard about it?" "The words." She pointed to a passage on her worksheet. "This one doesn't make sense the way it's written." He looked at it. She was right. It was a poorly worded reading comprehension question, the kind that was technically answerable but imprecise in a way that made it harder than it needed to be. "Answer it the way it should have been asked," he said. She looked at him. "If it's a bad question, figure out what it's actually trying to ask, and answer that." She thought about it. Then she wrote something, showed it to him. "That works," he said. She nodded, satisfied, and moved to the next problem. He went back to his schematic. He saw Victoria twice that first week of January, Wednesday evening and Saturday afternoon. The Wednesday visit was dinner at her place, which she'd started cooking more often as something she'd told him she was relearning how to want to do, because she'd spent years treating her apartment as a place to sleep between work and more work, and she was trying to use it differently. The dinner was good, not complicated. Pasta again, which seemed to be emerging as a shared default, but made with the focused attention she brought to most things. And they ate at her small dining table and talked about the Gray Line building and the board prep and a documentary she'd watched the night before that she couldn't decide if she'd liked or found infuriating. "What was infuriating about it?" Logan asked. "It was about a company that failed because the founder couldn't delegate. And I kept watching it thinking, I understand exactly why he couldn't, and that's the infuriating part. It's very uncomfortable to watch yourself in a cautionary tale. You're not that guy. I've been that guy," she said. "For the first 2 years, I was that guy. Diane was very patient with me." "What changed?" Victoria pushed pasta around her plate for a moment. "I burned out. Not visibly. I didn't fall apart publicly. But I was running on empty for a long time, and the quality of my decisions started reflecting it. And one day Diane sat down across from me and said very calmly, 'You're doing a bad job of pretending to be fine.'" A small smile. And I thought, she's right. And if she can see it, other people can too, which means I'm not even successfully hiding it, which makes it pointless. "So you stopped hiding it." "I stopped hiding it with Diane," she said. "That was the first step." She looked at him. "You were the second step." "When?" "The raccoon," she said simply. "Maisie and the raccoon. I watched you. The way you managed the daycare situation, the way you moved around Maisie, the way you were so clearly holding about 40 things simultaneously and making it look easy without pretending it was. And I thought, that's a person who doesn't have the luxury of performing, and he's not worse for it. He's actually better." Logan looked at the table. "I'd been performing for a long time," she said. "I thought that was what the job required. You were—" She stopped. "You were evidence that I was wrong." He looked back at her. There were moments with Victoria that caught him like this. Not the obvious ones, not the romantic ones, but these smaller ones where she said something precise and honest that rearranged something in him slightly. He'd spent years thinking of himself as the steady, unremarkable counterweight to her ambition and drive. The useful one, the reliable one, the one who held things while she built them. He hadn't known she'd been watching him the whole time, drawing different conclusions. "I didn't know that," he said. "I know you didn't." She held his gaze. "I'm telling you now. Look, The board meeting happened on the 17th of January, a Tuesday. Victoria had been in prep mode for 10 days. Not panicked, but operating at an elevated level of intensity that Logan recognized as her serious gear. She worked late, sent emails at unusual hours, had 3 calls with Diane that Logan knew about, and probably more that he didn't. He didn't crowd her during that stretch. He texted, made himself available, showed up with dinner on the Saturday before with the same reasoning he'd always operated on. Not because she'd asked, but because he understood what the week was costing her, and he had something useful to offer. She opened the door looking like she'd been at her laptop for 6 hours. She saw the food. She stepped back to let him in without a word, and then leaned her forehead against his shoulder briefly, just for a moment, before straightening up and carrying the food to the counter. He didn't make it a thing. She texted him at 2:15 on the afternoon of the 17th. Done. Harlow approved. Chen tried, didn't get there. Then, a minute later, "I need a drink, and I don't want to go anywhere. Can you come over?" He'd wrapped up at the Gray Line site at noon. Maisie was with his mother. "On my way," he wrote back. She was still in her board meeting clothes when he arrived. Formal blazer, the whole thing. And she was standing in her kitchen with a glass of wine and the specific expression of someone who'd just finished a significant battle and hadn't quite come down from it yet. Adrenaline still in the posture, relief working its way in underneath. "Tell me," he said. She told him. The meeting had run 2 hours longer than scheduled. Chen had brought in a third-party analysis of the Harlow market projections, something he'd commissioned independently, which was aggressive and technically within his rights as a board member, and also, Victoria said, with a flatness that suggested she'd been chewing on it for 3 hours, a move that would have unsettled a less prepared CEO. She had been prepared for it. "How?" Logan asked. "Because Diane has a contact at the research firm he used," she said. "We knew 3 days ago." The ghost of a smile. "I built the response into my presentation without indicating I knew it was coming." Logan stared at her. It was Diane's idea," she said. "I just executed it." "That's extremely calculated." "Yes." "I'm slightly afraid of you." "Good," she said, and this time the smile was full. "The votes went 4-1. Harlow moves in March. Chen is—" She exhaled. "He's a problem I'll keep managing, but I've got the board. And he knows I've got the board, which changes his calculus going forward." She set down her wine glass and looked at him. "I keep waiting for it to feel easier," she said. "And it doesn't. The threshold moves. Every time I clear one thing, the next thing is waiting." "Does that bother you?" She thought about it honestly. "No," she said. "It would bother me more if it stopped." She paused. "Is that a bad thing to admit?" "No," he said. "That's just who you are." She looked at him with the expression that still sometimes caught him off guard. The fully unguarded one. No professional layer, no performance. "I'm glad you know who I am," she said. "I've known for a while." "I know." She crossed to him. "I'm glad anyway." He put his arms around her and she leaned into it, and they stood in the kitchen that way for a while, the board meeting settling somewhere behind them, the city doing its winter thing outside the window. Bossa. The second complication arrived on a Friday, 2 weeks into February, and it came from a direction Logan hadn't looked. He'd been at the Gray Line site, finishing the 3rd week of his assessment, when Carla Voss came to find him on the 7th floor. She had her usual professional composure, but there was something slightly different in her expression, careful in a way that suggested she was about to deliver information she wasn't sure how he'd receive. She asked if he had a few minutes. They went to the small site office on the ground floor, a folding table and 2 plastic chairs and a whiteboard, and Carla sat down with the posture of someone who'd had this kind of conversation before. "Your assessment work has been outstanding," she said. I want to say that first and mean it. Thank you, Logan said. We've been discussing next steps internally, she said. The Halford Street project is going to move into full renovation, and based on your work, there's a strong internal recommendation to bring you in as the lead facilities coordinator for the full build-out. Logan was quiet. That would be a significant engagement, Carla continued. 18 months minimum, a full-time contract position with the possibility of staff conversion at the end, depending on how things develop. He looked at the whiteboard behind her. Someone had drawn a floor schematic and not erased it. 18 months, he said. Yes. That's different from the consulting scope. Significantly different, she agreed, which is why I'm bringing it to you directly rather than letting it come through the standard process. I want to make sure you have time to think about it seriously. She paused. There are things about your current position that make this a more complicated decision than it might be for someone without your, I don't want to say obligations because that's not the right word. Maisie, he said, she didn't flinch from it. The hours would be more demanding. The upside is that you'd be building something real. We have 3 additional projects in pipeline behind Halford Street. If you do this well, which I believe you will, this isn't an 18-month engagement. This is the start of a different kind of career. Logan heard all of that clearly. He also heard the part she hadn't said, that the hours would be demanding, and he was a single father, and those 2 facts were going to live in the same house. How long do I have to decide? He asked. 2 weeks, she said. We start full build-out planning in March. He drove home in the particular silence of someone carrying a problem that didn't have a clean answer. Not a bad problem, not the kind that made his stomach drop with dread. The kind that made his chest tight with the specific anxiety of standing in front of something real. He picked Maisie up from his mother's. She fell asleep in the back seat before they were out of the neighborhood, which she almost never did anymore, and he drove the last 8 minutes listening to her breathe and thinking about 18 months in March and the word career used in a context that applied to him. He called Victoria from the driveway, sitting in the car with Maisie, asleep in the back seat. They offered me the full project, he said when she picked up. A brief pause. Tell me, she said. He told her. She listened without interrupting, which she was better at now than she'd been 4 months ago, or maybe he was better at talking. Hard to know which. When he finished, she said, What's your gut? My gut says yes, he said. My head is doing the math on Maisie's routine and the hours. What does the math say? That it's doable, but it requires help. He paused. More help than I've needed to ask for. From who? He was quiet for a moment. From a lot of people, he said. Including me, she said. Not a question. Victoria. Including me, she said again, the same even tone. I'm saying it clearly so we don't have to dance around it. If you take this job, I want to help with Maisie. Not as a favor and not as a complication, as, she paused, as the person I actually am in her life. Maisie shifted in the back seat. Logan watched her in the rearview mirror. You know what you're signing up for, he said. I've known for a while, she said. I'm saying it out loud. He looked at his daughter in the mirror, asleep, her face slack and peaceful, one hand curled under her cheek. She called you about a frog, he said. She calls me about a lot of things, Victoria said. I answer, he exhaled. I'll call Carla on Monday, he said. Is that a yes? That's a yes. Logan? Yeah. This is what it looks like, she said quietly. Building towards something. You said you were done playing it safe. This is what not playing it safe looks like. He looked at the house, the lights in the windows, the winter dead tree in the front yard that would come back in April. Yeah, he said. I know. Are you scared? Yes. Good, she said. That means it's real. He called Carla Voss on Monday morning, the same parking lot, different coffee. Better coffee this time. He'd stopped at the place 2 blocks from the Gray Line site that Maisie had declared the one that smells right. On the one occasion he'd brought her past it. He'd been going there ever since. Carla picked up on the second ring. I'm in, Logan said. A brief pause, and then the warm professionalism shifted slightly, just slightly, into something that sounded like genuine relief. I'm very glad to hear that, she said. I'll get the contract to you by Wednesday. I'll have questions. I'd be concerned if you didn't. He got off the phone and stood in the parking lot and drank his coffee and watched a pigeon navigate the hood of the car next to his with extreme purposefulness. He thought about the version of himself that had stood in this same parking lot 2 months ago, holding a cold drink at a party and pretending he wasn't watching someone across the room. He thought about the 7 years before that, and the decision he'd made at 25 that had turned out to be less of a permanent decision and more of a waiting room. He'd spent a long time in that waiting room. He understood now that that the version of himself at 25 hadn't been ready for the room on the other side of it, and that the years of steadiness and practicality and choosing the safe thing hadn't been wasted time. They'd been the work, the invisible, unglamorous, deeply necessary work of becoming the kind of person who could handle a room like this when it finally opened. But he also understood, and this was newer, this understanding, that staying in the waiting room past its usefulness was its own kind of failure. There was a point at which caution stopped being wisdom and became just fear wearing a reasonable face. He'd been getting close to that point. Maybe he'd already crossed it some days. The pigeon left. Logan finished his coffee. He went to work. March arrived, and with it the Harlow office launch, which consumed Victoria for approximately 3 weeks in the way that major professional milestones consumed her, completely, but with a visible undercurrent of the specific energy she got when something she'd built was becoming real. She opened the Harlow space on a Tuesday, sent Logan a photo of an empty office with boxes still stacked against the wall and 2 of her team members looking exhausted but pleased in the foreground. "First day," she wrote underneath. He looked at the photo for a moment. The empty office, the boxes, the tired faces that had helped carry something from idea to existence. "Proud of you," he wrote back. A pause. "Thank you for meaning that." He put his phone in his pocket. Across the Halford Street building's 6th floor, a contractor called his name about a pipe routing question, and he went. The gray line work was everything Carla had described, demanding in the specific way of large-scale projects, where the problems were never the ones you'd prepared for, and the solutions always required 3 conversations before they became actual solutions. Logan worked long days and some evenings. His mother took Maisie 3 afternoons a week. Victoria took her on Thursdays, a development that had started as logistical and had become, quietly, its own kind of routine. Maisie accepted this with the equanimity of a child who had decided the new arrangement was good and therefore did not require examination. She did her homework at Victoria's office on Thursday afternoons, which the staff apparently found delightful and which Maisie treated as entirely normal. Diane Okafor had given Maisie a small desk in the corner of the break room, claimed for her specifically, with a label that said Maisie's desk in Diane's handwriting. Maisie had told Logan about the desk with the quiet pride of someone who had been given territory. "She made you a desk," Logan said. "It has my name on it." "I see that." "Diane has good handwriting," Maisie said. "She does." "Mine is getting better." Maisie looked at him. "Victoria said it just takes practice." "She's right." "She said she used to have bad handwriting, and she practiced until it was better." Maisie paused. "Did you know that about her?" "I did not know that." Maisie seemed to find this surprising. "You know a lot about her," she said, in the tone she used for observations she was filing away, rather than questions she expected answered. "I know," Logan said, "but not everything." Maisie appeared to consider this philosophically acceptable and went back to her spelling worksheet. The thing nobody tells you about building something, a project, a company, a relationship, a life, is that the most significant moments rarely announce themselves. They don't arrive with the weight they deserve. They slide in sideways, dressed as ordinary Thursdays, disguised as dinner or a dropped fork or a conversation that starts about something small and ends somewhere you didn't anticipate. Logan understood this better at 32 than he had at any earlier age. He'd been present for enough of Maisie's milestones to know that the ones he'd braced for and planned around often arrived and passed quietly, and the ones he'd underestimated split him open. First steps, first day of school. The night she'd asked him where her mother was, simply, matter-of-factly, at age 4, And he'd sat on the kitchen floor afterward for 10 minutes because the question had been easier to answer than the feeling it left behind. Life didn't operate on your schedule. It had its own one. The best you could do was stay present enough to recognize the moments worth holding on to when they came. He was getting better at that. On a Saturday in late March, Logan and Victoria took Maisie to the Natural History Museum for the second time. Her request specifically for the volcano section, which she felt she had more questions about after additional research. They moved through the exhibit at Maisie's pace, which was thorough and non-negotiable. She read every placard. She asked every docent within reach at least one question. She stood in front of the cross-section model again for 4 minutes, which Logan timed, and then turned to Victoria and said, "The scary thing is already inside it." "The magma," Victoria said. "It's just waiting." Maisie looked at the model. "And then one day it goes." "That's right. But then things grow after," Maisie said. She pointed to a photograph on the wall. Volcanic soil, new vegetation pushing through gray ground. "It says here that the soil is really good after, because of the—" She worked through the word, "minerals." "It's true," Victoria said. "Some of the most fertile land in the world is around old volcanoes." Maisie looked at the photograph for a long time. "So it has to go first," she said finally, "and then things grow." "Usually, yeah," Victoria said. Logan watched his daughter look at the photograph with the particular expression she wore when she was making connections that she couldn't yet fully articulate, filing something away. 7 years old, and she was standing in front of a museum exhibit about volcanic soil, and she was understanding something that most adults spent decades avoiding. Some things had to break first. Some pressure had to release. And in the aftermath, if you stayed, if you didn't run from the changed landscape, things grew. Different things. Better things sometimes. Things the old ground hadn't been capable of. He thought about a 24-year-old sitting in a kitchen at 2 a.m, making a list of things he didn't know how to do. He thought about the 11 years of careful, deliberate steadiness that had followed. He thought about a concrete landing and a dead plant, and 4 words that hadn't been a joke. He thought, yeah, the soil is good here, because of everything that had to go first. Victoria glanced at him across the top of Maisie's head. The look they had sometimes. The one that didn't need a caption. He reached over and took her hand. She folded her fingers around his. Maisie moved to the next exhibit without looking back, already reading the next placard. April was a series of long days and quiet evenings, and the particular satisfaction of a project finding its rhythm. The Halford Street build-out was moving. Not without problems, never without problems, but moving with the momentum of something that had been properly planned. Logan was good at this work in the specific way that comes from doing something for years before you understand you're good at it. He could walk into a building and read it the way some people read faces, the systems talking through their symptoms, the history of decisions embedded in the infrastructure. Carla called him one Friday afternoon, not about a problem. "The partners want to meet you," she said. "Which partners?" "All 3 of them," she said. "Next Thursday. Don't read anything into it except that you've been doing excellent work and they'd like to put a face to the name." He read something into it anyway. He was human. He told Victoria that evening, on the phone, while Maisie was finishing a bath. "The 3 partners," Victoria said. "Is that significant?" "For Greyline?" "Yes." A brief pause. "That's not a routine meeting, Logan." Carla said, "Carla is being appropriately measured. I'm telling you what a meeting with all 3 Greyline principals actually means in the context of a mid-project." Her voice had the quality it got when she was being precise because she thought precision mattered. "It means they're thinking longer than 18 months. He sat on the edge of his bed. "Or they found a problem with my work," he said. "Did they find a problem with your work?" "Not that anyone's told me." "Then stop doing the thing where you assume the worst explanation first." She said it without irritation, just the directness of someone who'd watched him do it enough times to name it. "Take the meeting. Be exactly who you've been on this project. See what they say. And if it's bigger than I expected, then it's bigger than you expected," she said. "You don't have to decide anything tonight." From down the hall, "Dad, the water's cold." "That means you've been in too long," he called back. "I was thinking." "Get out, Maisie." A pause, then the sound of water draining. Victoria laughed on the other end of the line. She was thinking, she said. She thinks in the bath, apparently. I don't know where she got that. I think in the shower, Victoria said. That tracks, Logan said. Take the meeting, she said. Call me after. Bet. He took the meeting. He called her after. The three principles of Greyline Partners were nothing like Logan had constructed in his head, which was its own lesson about the imaginary authority figures people build in the waiting rooms of their own ambition. They were two men and a woman in their late 50s and early 60s, practical and direct, who sat around a conference table and asked him questions about Halford Street for 40 minutes, and then sat back and told him what they were actually thinking. They were acquiring two more buildings in the same corridor. They wanted a facilities director, not a contractor, not a consultant, a permanent position, who could oversee all three as a portfolio. Someone who understood the specific intersection of old infrastructure and new development without needing it translated. Someone who could build systems across the properties that worked the same way, could be managed consistently, could scale. They had been watching Logan's work since January. He sat across the table and listened, and kept his face professional while something in his chest was doing its complicated business. This would be a significant change from your current situation, one of the partners said. A man named Howard, with the direct, unornamented quality of someone who'd spent 30 years getting to the point. We understand that. We're not asking for an answer today. What's the timeline? Logan asked. We'd want the position filled by July 1st, Howard said. Ideally by someone who already knows Halford Street and can walk into the other two properties with the same approach. July 1st, 3 months. Maisie's school year ended in June. I'll need 2 weeks, Logan said. Take 3, Howard said. This is a big decision. We'd rather you make it right than make it fast. He drove home. He did not call Victoria from the parking lot this time. He drove home, picked Maisie up from his mother's, made dinner, and sat through an evening of Maisie explaining a school project about ecosystems with the full detail of someone who considered him a necessary audience. An ecosystem is everything connected, she said. Like, the plants need the bugs, and the bugs need the birds, and the birds need the plants. And if you take one out, all the others feel it. That's right, Logan said. We have to make a poster. She pushed a piece of paper across the table. I drew the food web. He looked at it. The connections were rendered in crayon with more accuracy than he expected. That's good, Bug. I know, she said matter-of-factly. Mrs. Pryor said it was one of the best in the class. She did? She said it with her, I'm impressed, but I don't want everyone to feel bad voice. Maisie demonstrated the voice, which was a fairly accurate impression of a teacher managing classroom dynamics. But I could tell. He looked at her food web. The crayon lines connecting everything to everything else. Plants to bugs to birds and back around. Nothing existing in isolation. Everything part of the same system, the same ongoing negotiation of dependence and survival. Everything connected. He thought about a job offer in July 1st in Maisie's school year, and his mother and Marcus and Victoria, and a desk with Maisie's desk on it in Diane's handwriting. He thought about ecosystems and the things you can't remove without the rest of it feeling it. He thought, I'm already in the ecosystem. I've been in it for years. The question isn't whether to be in it. The question is whether I'm going to step fully into it or keep standing at the edge pretending I haven't. He put Maisie to bed. He sat on the couch. He called Victoria. They offered me the full position, he said. Permanent. Director of facilities across 3 properties. The silence lasted about 3 seconds. Logan, she said. I know. I know. Are you going to take it? He'd been sitting with the question all evening, and he'd known the answer since the conference room, had probably known it since the parking lot in December when he'd listened to Carla Voss and felt the vertigo of something real. Yes, he said, I'm going to take it. He heard her exhale, say, the real kind, the one that meant something had released. Good, she said. She stopped. I'm proud of you. I know that sounds... Don't qualify it, he said. A small pause. I'm proud of you, she said again, simply. He sat with that for a moment. Let it land without deflecting it. He was working on that. The receiving end of things, The willingness to let good things sit inside you without immediately finding a reason they didn't count. "Come over," he said. "Maisie's asleep, and I don't want to talk about this on the phone." "I'll be there in 20 minutes, she said. She was there in 18. Hati. She came in with her coat still on and the specific expression of someone who'd driven over because they needed to be in the same room for a conversation, not because there was anything left to say. He met her at the door, and she looked at him the way she'd been looking at him for months now. The fully present version, no managed distance. And he thought, not for the first time, about the ridiculous expenditure of time that was 11 years of looking at someone and not saying the thing. "You're shaking your head," she said. "I'm just thinking." "About what?" "About how long this took." She considered that. "Which part?" "Any of it," he said. "All of it." He stepped back to let her in. "Come in. It's cold." She came in. He took her coat. They went to the couch, same couch where she'd fallen asleep. Same lamp, different season outside the window. And she sat facing him with her legs tucked under her and her hands in her lap. "Tell me what you're thinking," she said. He told her, not about the job, or not only about the job, about the parking lot in December, about the meeting that afternoon, about Maisie's food web and everything connected, about the specific version of himself he'd spent years maintaining, reliable and careful, the one who got through things and didn't ask for more than what was offered, and how that version had genuinely served its purpose, and was also not sufficient anymore. "Not sufficient for what?" she asked. "For this," he said. "For everything that this actually is." She was quiet for a moment. The lamp made its warm light. Somewhere in the house, a floorboard made the small sound that floorboards make in March when the temperature is changing. "I want to ask you something," she said. "And I want you to know before I ask it that there is no version of your answer that changes anything." He looked at her. "Okay," he said. "When you imagine—" She stopped, started more carefully. "When you think about where this goes, us, you and me and Maisie and all of it." She met his eyes. "What do you see?" It was a significant question, the kind that deserved the honest version rather than the safe one. He thought about what he actually saw, not the cautious thumbnail, not the hedged version, but the real one that lived in the part of him that had stopped performing. "I see mornings," he said. I don't mean that to sound small, I mean specifically mornings. Maisie with her cereal and her opinions about the day, and you before you're fully functional, and all of us in the same kitchen that belongs to all of us." He paused. "I see you at the table with your coffee and a problem you're already working on, and Maisie telling you something about sharks or volcanoes or whatever the current obsession is, and you listening even though you're half thinking about something else, and somehow she can't tell the difference." Victoria had gone very still. "I see someone who picks up when Maisie calls," he said. "Not as an obligation. Not because she's attached to me and Maisie comes with the package, but because she genuinely—" He stopped. "You love her," he said. "I've watched you love her, and she knows it, even if she's never going to say it in a way that sounds like anything other than, 'Did you know frogs can breathe through their skin?' A small sound from Victoria. Not quite a laugh, not quite anything else. "That's what I see," Logan said. "Is that—" He looked at her. "Is that too much?" "No," she said very quietly. "Because I can—" "Logan." She reached over and put her hand against the side of his face, which she had never done before, and the directness of it, the simple, unornamented fact of it, stopped him completely. "That's what I see, too." He looked at her. "The mornings," she said. "The kitchen. She shook her head. "I've been seeing it for months. I've been not saying it because it felt like asking for too much." "You told me to stop making myself smaller than I am," he said. "Yes." "Same." She looked at him for a long moment, and then she laughed. The real one, slightly undone at the edges. And he put his hand over hers, the one still at his face, and held it there. "I'm in love with you," she said. Not performing it. Just the fact of it. The same way she'd said, "I'm not going anywhere" at the sandwich counter. The same way she'd said, "I'm proud of you" on the phone 20 minutes ago. Steady, direct, clear. "I know," he said. "I've been in love with you for 7 years."
He paused. Maybe longer. I stopped counting. That's a long time to wait. Yeah, he said. It was. They stayed like that for a while, in the lamplight, in the quiet house, without any particular urgency about what came next. Not because nothing was next. There was plenty next. The job and the logistics and the 10,000 ordinary complications of building a life with another person who had her own full life to bring into the same space. But because the moment didn't need to be rushed past. It was enough on its own. That was something Logan was still learning, that some moments were complete in themselves, that not everything good was a bridge to the next thing. The summer came the way summers do when you're busy enough that time moves differently. In chunks of completed work and milestones passed, the calendar less a sequence of days than a series of things that happened. Logan accepted the Gray Line position in late April, signed the contract on a Thursday, texted Victoria a single word, done, and received 3 exclamation points back, which was the most exclamation points she had ever sent in any communication. He told his current employer, who was disappointed but decent about it. He finished out 6 weeks of transition. He spent May training his replacement with the thoroughness of someone who had always understood that the quality of the handoff said as much about you as the quality of the work itself. Maisie ended 2nd grade in June. Her teacher sent Logan a note, not the concerning kind, the good kind, saying that Maisie had finished the year as one of the strongest readers in the class, and that her curiosity was genuinely one of the brightest things in the room. He read the note twice, and then put it in the folder where he kept the important things, the particular archive of evidence that she was going to be fine. He started the full Gray Line director role on July 2nd, 1 day late, because July 1st fell on a Tuesday, and he'd taken Maisie to see a film she'd been anticipating for weeks on the actual holiday, and Howard had told him July 1st approximately, with the understanding that approximately had some flex in it. The first day of the new job felt less dramatic than it might have, which was probably because he already knew the building and the problems and most of the contractors and half of the staff. It felt less like a beginning than a continuation, the next floor of the same structure, built on the foundation of the work already done, which was, Logan thought, probably what real change felt like. Not a rupture, a continuation that had been impossible before certain things were cleared away. The holiday dinner happened on a Saturday in mid-December, almost exactly 1 year after the engagement party where a careless joke had cracked 11 years of silence. Logan's house, same as Christmas. His parents, same as always. Marcus and his wife, Clara. Diane Okafor and her husband, who got along with Logan's father in the specific way of 2 people who've both spent decades in rooms dominated by people louder than themselves. Victoria, who'd arrived an hour early to help, and had immediately been recruited by Logan's mother into a collaborative effort on the side dishes that Logan was not invited to interfere with. He'd watched them from the kitchen doorway, his mother directing, Victoria executing, the 2 of them talking in the easy register of people who had figured out the code to each other, and felt something quiet and complete. The word that came to him, standing in the doorway, was assembled. Like something that had been in pieces for a long time was finally assembled. Not forced into place, not arranged, just arrived at. Maisie had attached herself to Diane's husband, whose name was Warren, and who had apparently told her something about bioluminescent sea creatures that had fully replaced volcanoes as her primary area of inquiry. Warren, who did not appear to mind being a resource, had spent 40 minutes answering questions with the patience of a man who had found a genuinely interested audience. Dinner was loud in the way that dinners are loud when enough people who like each other are in the same room. There were 3 separate conversations happening simultaneously at the table, and at least one argument about a film that Logan wasn't following. Marcus told a story that started with a true incident and gradually accumulated detail until it became something else. And everyone let him because the final version was better than the accurate one. Victoria was across the table, between Diane and Logan's mother, and she was fully present in the way she'd learned to be. Not the managed, professional present, but the actual kind, the kind that let herself be included. She laughed at Marcus's story at the right moment. She asked Warren a question about bioluminescence that Maisie immediately hijacked. She caught Logan's eye across the table once, just briefly, with the expression that was specifically theirs, the one that meant, look at this,
Look at what we have here, and then turned back to the conversation. After dinner, after the dishes, after Maisie had hit the specific wall of a child who has stayed up past her time and is refusing to acknowledge it, after all of that, the evening wound down to its last hour, the particular warmth of a gathering that has been good and is ending well. Logan was in the kitchen when Victoria came in. "Here," she said, reaching past him to take something from a serving dish. He turned to look. She was stealing food from the dish he'd been about to put away. One of the leftover things, something that had migrated from the table. She ate it without asking. He looked at her. "That was mine," he said. "There's a whole dish of it. The principal, you were going to give it to me anyway." She was right. He always did. He looked at her standing in his kitchen in the lamplight, with the sounds of his family and her friends in the next room, and the house warm with all of it, and something opened in him, quietly, without ceremony, the way the best things open, and the words came out the same way they had a year ago, in front of an engagement party crowd on a rooftop, with the same tone, the same register. "I love you, Victoria." She looked at him. Not the way she'd looked at him a year ago. The stunned, involuntary flush, the "can you say that again?" She looked at him the way a person looks at something they know, completely, is theirs. "I love you too," she said. Simple as that. From the other room, his mother's voice. "Are you two going to stay in the kitchen all night?" "We're cleaning up," Logan called back. "You're not cleaning up," his mother called back, Maisie's voice groggy and determined. "Are they kissing?" "Maisie," Logan said, "I'm just asking. Go back to the couch." "I'm on the couch." "Then stay on it." A brief pause. "You should tell her," Maisie said, to nobody in particular, and then apparently resolved to leave it there. Logan looked at Victoria. Victoria looked at Logan. She was trying not to smile and losing. He kissed her in his kitchen, briefly, while Marcus made a sound in the other room that was clearly directed at them, and Diane said finally, again, for the record, and his father said something that got lost under the general commentary. It wasn't a movie moment. It was slightly embarrassing and slightly clumsy, and entirely surrounded by people with opinions about it, and when they came back into the living room, everyone made exactly as much of a thing of it as you'd expect from people who'd been waiting for it for various lengths of time. Logan sat down next to Maisie on the couch. She was listing to one side, fighting sleep with the stubborn determination of someone who had decided this evening was worth staying conscious for. "Did you tell her?" she asked. "Tell her what?" Maisie gave him the look she deployed when she found his answers insufficient. "Yes," he said. She nodded slowly, satisfied, and leaned against his arm. "Good," she said. And then she was asleep. Logan sat in the warm room with his daughter leaning against him and Victoria across from him, deep in a conversation with Diane, her face animated and easy, fully herself. Marcus was telling another story. Logan's mother and father were on the small love seat they'd occupied together at every gathering for 30 years, his father's hand resting on his mother's knee, without either of them appearing to think about it. This was not the life Logan had planned at 24, sitting in a kitchen at 2 in the morning with a list of things he didn't know how to do. He hadn't planned any particular life then. He just tried to handle the next thing, and then the thing after that, and to not lose the people who mattered in the managing of it. He'd gotten something better than a plan. He'd gotten this, assembled by years and accidents and choices and one joke at a party that wasn't really a joke, people and love, and all the complicated ordinary weight of it, all the things he'd been afraid to want and had wanted anyway, built into the room around him. Not perfect. Maisie would wake up tomorrow and have a hard day for no particular reason. Victoria and Logan would argue eventually about something real, and it would be uncomfortable, and they would work through it. The Gray Line project would have problems. Someone's health would become a concern. Life would do what life does, which is to say it would be uneven and occasionally brutal and consistently unpredictable. That was not a flaw in the design. That was the design. The things worth having were the things you couldn't protect by holding them at arm's length. They required you to be fully in them, uninsulated, available to the whole range of what they were. You had to be willing to stand in the field when the volcano went, and trust that what grew in the aftermath was worth the cost of the ground that had to break first. Logan had spent 11 years at arm's length from the thing he wanted most. He understood now, in a way he could not have understood at 25 or 28 or even 30, that the arm's length hadn't been cowardice, not entirely. It had been the years doing their work on him, the slow and invisible preparation that made it possible to step fully in when the moment came and not run from it. But the moment had come, and he had stepped in, and the ground on the other side of it was good. He looked at the room again, his daughter asleep against his arm, the people who had stayed, the ones he'd allowed himself to need, and who had needed him in return, and who were here, in his house, on a December evening, being exactly and imperfectly themselves. That was the thing people didn't say enough about love, the real kind, the lived-in kind. It wasn't the feeling of completion, the fairy tale click of a missing piece found. It was something more specific and more durable than that. It was the feeling of being known, actually known, the whole inventory, the list of things you don't know how to do, and the things you do and the difference between the two, and chosen anyway. Chosen not despite the full picture, but because of it. Victoria had seen the full picture for 11 years. She'd been waiting for him to see her seeing it. He had, finally. Across the room, she glanced over at him, brief, instinctive, and he looked back, and the expression she gave him was the unguarded one, the one he knew now by heart, the one that meant there you are, in the specific way of someone for whom that sentence had been a long time coming. There you are. After 11 years of standing in the same room, learning the same person, building the same friendship into something that looked, by the end, like the only possible foundation for what it became. There you are. There they were.